So we said there were 4 of them. We started with the bond refunding or refinancing. Then we went to the lease. So now we got the adjusted net present value as the long-term financing decision number 3. We got the long-term financing decision number 3 as the adjusted NPV, as the adjusted net present value. I want you to look what we discuss. Yeah, we are on the long-term financing decisions. We started the bond refunding or refinancing. That was number 1. Then we went to the lease. So we have the notes for the lease. Yes, yeah. So now we go to number 3 as adjusted net present value. Number 3 will now be adjusted net present value. So when it comes to adjusted net present value, we shall be looking at a similar way on how to get the NPV, but we shall be able to discover that normal NPV cannot be used because of some issues we should be able to consider. So we can write something brief concerning adjusted NPV, where we can summarize that the adjusted NPV is normally applicable. The adjusted NPV is normally applicable under the following circumstances. It is normally applicable under the following circumstances. Under the following circumstances. Number one is that if the financing of the new project, if the financing of the new project is different from the company's existing capital structure, if the financing of the new project is different from the company's existing capital structure, i.e., the new project may be financed, i.e., the new project may be
3 minutes ago, Sami go to Chakora, I'm starting another one. Koro manober, jogot kagi do kunyokanyo to gichu ngat kangato pesane, ndogi oyene gigikon.
So we are saying that if that's number one, we say if the financing of the new project is different from the company's existing capital structure, i.e., the new project may be financed using 80% debt and 20% equity, while the company is financed using 40% debt and 60% equity. So the sentence was reading that if the financing of the new project is different from the company's existing capital structure, i.e., when the new project may be financed using 80% debt and 20% equity, 80% debt and 20% equity, while the company is financed using 40% debt and 60% equity, 40% debt and 60% equity. So that is now number one. Then number two is that when the project is partly financed, using the loan where the government has given the subsidy, Hence, the interest rate will be lower than the market interest rate. Hence, the the interest rate will be lower than the market interest rate. Hence, the interest rate is lower than the market interest rate. Then number 3 is that where there are different types of the cash flows, where there are different types of the cash flows, where there are different types of the cash flows generated by the project, where there are different types of the cash flows generated by the project, which are discounted using different discounting rates, Then the next one is that where there are complex tax structures, where there are complex tax structures associated with the project, i.e., the project may be exempted, from paying tax for some time. The project may be exempted from paying tax for some time. The project may be exempted from paying tax for some time. The next one is that where the capital allowances, and the tax benefit arising from the project, where the capital allowances and the tax benefit arising from the project, where the capital allowances and the tax benefits arising from the project is only provided for some period. It is only provided for some period. So those are the reasons why we may opt to use the adjusted NPV and not the normal net present value. Those are some of the reasons why we may opt to use the adjusted NPV and not the normal NPV. Then now a new paragraph, we summarize that under these circumstances, comma, adjusted NPV is computed. By adopting the following steps. Adjusted NPV is computed by adopting the following steps. So we start with step number 1. So step 1 is that determine the best case. Determine the best case NPV. Because the step number 1, we said that determine the best case NPV. We determine the best case NPV. So for that, you write that this is the NPV of the project. This is the NPV of the project. It is the NPV of the project. Is the NPV of the project, assuming it is all equity financed. It is the NPV of the project, assuming it is all equity financed. I.e., the company is unlevered. the company is unlevered, i.e. the company is unlevered, i.e. the company is unlevered. Then we continue by noting that if the project is all equity financed, if the project is all equity financed, if the project is all equity financed, then the discounting rate, will be the cost of equity. The discounting rate will be the cost of equity of the unlevered firm. Then the discounting rate will be the cost of equity of the unlevered firm. Then the discounting rate will be the cost of equity of the unlevered firm, which is obtained using CAPM as follows. Which is obtained using CAPM as follows. Which is obtained using CAPM as follows. So to get the cost of capital will be the same as KEU. Cost of capital is the same as KEU, which is the cost of equity for unlevered firm. So it will be given by the risk-free rate, expected return for the market, minus the risk-free rate, and the beta factor of equity for the unlevered firm. Then the beta factor of equity for the unlevered firm. Then you recall how to get the beta factor of equity of the unlevered firm. Simply take beta factor of equity for the levered firm, 1 plus D over E, then 1 minus the tax rate. So you remember the Hamad model? We had used those formulas before, how you are to apply them to get the WSC. So as we go through each step, I will be using the question from your past paper. As I go through each step, I will be able to use the question from your past paper. So that question should be April 2022, question 1, part A. We check the question for April 2022, question number 1, part A. So April 2022, question number 1, part A. April 2022, question number 1, part A. Question 1, part A. So that question 1, part A for April 2022, they said that Treetop Limited is considering an investment project in the tourism industry worthy shillings 48 millions, which will be diversification from the mainstream activities. Diversification from the mainstream activities. So the shillings 48 million project cost will be financed as follows. 10 million using the internal funds. 10 million using the internal funds. 20 million using the rights issue, and 18 million with the long-term loans. 18 million with the long-term loans. So the investment is expected to generate pre-tax net cash inflows of approximately shillings 14 million per year for a period of 10 years. The residual value at the end of the 10-year period will be 15 million after tax. So as the investment is in an area where the government wishes to develop the surplus loan of 8 million out of a total of 18 million, which is available. Then this will cost 2% below the company's normal cost of the long-term debt finance, which is 8%, which is meant to be 8%. So additional information, they said not number one. The company's equity beta is 0.85, and it is financial gearing is given as 60% equity and debt percent, 40% debt by value. Not number two, they were saying that average equity beta in the tourism industry is 1.2, and average gearing will be 50% equity and 50% debt by the market value. Not number three, risk-free rate is 5.5% per annum. Not number four, the market return is 12% per annum. Not number five, issue costs are estimated to be 1% of the debt finance, excluding the one of the subsidy. Then 4% for equity financing. These costs are not tax allowable. The corporate tax rate is supposed to be what percent? 30%. So required, Roman letter 1, they wanted you to get adjusted present value for the proposed investment project. Then Roman letter 2, propose 3 circumstances under which adjusted present value will be preferred to the normal net present value approach as a method of evaluating the capital investment project. I've given you 5 of them. Which are some of the methods which we can be able to apply in order to evaluate those particular projects. So that is now the first adjusted present value. So there are 5 of them that I've provided to you. But our concern, we go back to the Roman letter 1. So when we go back to the Roman letter 1, we want to get the best case NPV. I've said that our best case NPV is the NPV of the project, assuming it is all equity financed. Assuming it is all equity financed. So there is something I would like you to know. There are 2 items there that normally make us. So there is something we refer to as equity beta. Equity beta. There is another one we refer to as the asset beta. The asset beta. So the 2 of them, we need to distinguish them. So when they mention about equity beta, it will be the beta factor of equity of the Lippert firm. But asset beta will be the beta factor of equity of an Lippert firm. So I would like you to write those that note. So LB, you can write that equity beta is the beta factor of equity of the Lippert firm. Equity beta is the beta factor of equity of the Lippert firm. Is the beta factor of equity of the Lippert firm. While the asset beta is the beta factor of equity of an Lippert firm. Asset beta is the beta factor of equity for the an Lippert firm. So when you get those 2 terms in the question, you should be able now to assess them like that. So here we need also to confirm some of the items that are being considered. Some of those items, we have said that we need to come up with the best case NPV. To get the best case NPV, there are these 2 items we apply to get the NPV. So I would like you to quote the note number 1. I would like you to check the note number 1. Note 1, they have said that the company's equity beta is 0.85. and it is financial gearing is what percent? 60% equity and 40% debt. But there is the note number 2. Note 2, they have said that average equity beta in what? The tourism industry. So if you got the first paragraph, you will get to understand that. If you got the first paragraph, where they were able to tell us that Treetop Limited is considering an investment project in which company? Tourism industry. So we are not evaluating Treetop Limited. We are evaluating which company? Tourism. We are evaluating tourism. So note number 1 is about Treetop industry. Note number 2 is the one for what? The tourism industry. So we ignore the note number 1. Note 1 is for the company, which is the Treetop Limited. But we want to go to the tourism. So when we shall be calculating this beta factor of equity for unlevered farm, we calculate the one for the tourism. So we use the note number 2. We use the note number 2 to calculate the beta factor of equity for the unlevered farm. So in that note number 2, average equity beta, that's the beta factor of equity for the levered farm, it is 1.2. It is 1.2 divided by 1 plus D over E. So the average gearing ratio is 50% equity and 50% debt. That means debt is 50%, which is the same as 0.5. Equity is also 50%, which is also the same as 0.5. Then in the note number 5, they gave you the corporate tax rate of 30%. That's now 1 minus 0.3. So get that figure to give us now the beta factor of equity of the unlevered farm, so that we get the beta factor of equity of the unlevered farm. Takuja ngapi? So you can round it off maybe into 3 decimal places. If you convert it into 3 decimal places, you do it 0.706. So after that, we can now get our KEU. So KEU, I've given you the formula up there. It is the risk-free rate plus in brackets expected return for the market minus the risk-free rate, then the beta factor of equity for the unlevered farm. So that risk-free rate in the note number 3, it is 5.5. It is meant to be 5.5. Then expected return for the market, it was given to you in the note number 4. It is 12. We also minus 5.5. Then beta factor of equity for unlevered, it is 0.706. So that now should be able to give you what is supposed to be the cost of equity for the unlevered farm, which should now be the discounting rate. $10. So roughly, we can have it roughly as 10%. We can have it roughly as 10%. Then we also need to get after-tax cash flows. The question had given you pre-tax. Are you able to see the paragraph number 3? So investment is expected to generate pre-tax net cash flows of how much? 14. So pre-tax is the same as before the tax. So we need to get after-tax cash flows. So after-tax cash flows, after-tax cash flows. So get 70%. 70% of 14 million. After subtracting the tax of 30%, you see the tax is 30%. So get 70% of 14 million to give us the after-tax cash flows. 9.8 million. So we get the 9.8 million. So we are computing the best case NPV. We are calculating the best case NPV. Best case NPV. It will be given by present value for the cash inflows. We minus the present value for the cash outflows. So to get our best case NPV, it will simply be the present value of the cash inflows. We subtract the present value of the cash outflows. So we start with the present value for the cash inflows. We start off with the present value for the cash inflows. So it will be annuity multiplied by present value interest factor for the annuity. Our discounting rate is 10%. You see our KEU. So it will be 10% for how many years? Those cash flows were 14 million for a period of how many years? In that second part, the paragraph number 3.
10 years.
Yeah, so it is meant to be for 10 years. Like that. So our annuity is your 9.8 million. The after-tax cash flows. What 9.8 million. So confirm 10% in year 10. Confirm 10% in year 10 in the annuity table. 10% in year 10 should be which figure? 6.1. 6. 1. There is 4.
Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
Then there is also the residual value or the salvage value. You see, after 10 years, they talked about the residual value. So residual value is the same as the scrap value. Residual value is the same as the scrap value. It's the same as the scrap value. So that scrap value, it is only occurring once to be 10% in year 10. So that scrap value or residual value, you see the 15 million after tax. So we take the 15 millions, then check now in the single period table. What is 10% in year 10? Because that one is only occurring once. 0.3055. So add those two figures, they should give you present value for the cash inflows. They should give you present value for the cash inflows. And now you would less present value for the cash outflows. So present value for the cash outflows would be the cost of the project, which was given in the first paragraph as 48 millions. So now subtract 48 millions to get the best case NPV. Get the best case NPV. So that we come up with the best case NPV. So it is simply NPV of the project, assuming it is all equity financed. It is simply NPV of the project, assuming it is all equity financed. Assuming it is all equity financed. So it has given us 18.01. Online, you are getting which figure? Someone is getting 18 million. Anyone else? I've seen 17.99958. So that should be our step number 1 when we are computing the adjusted NPV. Now we got the step number 2. We now got the step number 2. Let us go to the step number 2. So the step number 2 is that determine the present value. Determine the present value. Determine the present value of the subsidy. Determine the present value of the subsidy. So step number 2 will be that determine the present value of the subsidy. So under that, we summarize that subsidy is savings. Subsidy is the savings. Subsidy is the savings in the form of interest. Subsidy is the savings in the form of interest. In the form of interest associated with the use of the subsidized loan. Associated with the use of the subsidized loan. Associated with the use of. Then we continue by noting that the subsidy is normally provided by the government. It is normally provided by the government. The subsidy is normally provided by the government in order to encourage investment in a given area. In order to encourage investment in a given area. In order to encourage investment in a given area. It is therefore a risk-free benefit. It is therefore a risk-free benefit. It is therefore a risk-free benefit, which is discounted. It is therefore a risk-free benefit, which is discounted using the risk-free rate. It is therefore a risk-free benefit which is discounted using the risk-free rate. So let us first get the amount of the subsidy. We need first of all to come up with the amount of the subsidy. So amount of the subsidy amount of the subsidy. So I want you to go to the paragraph number. I want you to check in the paragraph number 3. So are you able to see that paragraph number 3, where they say that paragraph number 3 at the end of the line number 2, they have said that as the investment is in an area where the government wishes to develop, the subsidized loan of 8 million out of the total of how much? 18 million, which is available. So this will cost what percent? 2% below the company's normal cost of the long-term debt, which is what percent? 8%. So the subsidy is the 2%. The market interest rate is 8%, but the government has provided a subsidy of 2%. So the subsidy is the 2%, of the 8 million. 2% of the 8 million. Because 8 million is the loan that had a subsidy. 8 million is the debt that has a subsidy. So what should be 2% of the 8 million? 0.16 million. 0.16 million. So, but interest is normally a tax allowable expense. So we need to less the tax on that. We less the tax on that. To get the net subsidy, we minus the tax. So tax, get 30% of 0.16 million. Get 30% of 0.16 million. So what should be 30% of 0.16 million? 0.048. So when you subtract, what will be the net subsidy? We now get the net subsidy. Get the net subsidy, which is going to be 0.11. So we are computing the present value of the subsidy. We need to get the present value of the subsidy. So present value of the subsidy, you simply get the annuity multiplied by the present value interest factor for the annuity. Also, I've said in the question, but you see in the notes. In the notes, we have written that it is normally a risk-free benefit, and therefore it is discounted using which rate? The risk-free rate. So risk-free rate in the question is given as 5.5%. So it will be 5.5% for 10 years. It will be 5.5% for 10 years. 5.5% for 10 years. So 5.5% is not in the table. We need to calculate that figure. So when it is not in the table, we calculate the annuity using this part. 1 minus 1 plus r raised to the power of -10. Then we divide by r. We normally take 1 minus, in brackets, 1 plus r raised to the power of -n. We divide by r. So which is the same as 1 minus 1 plus, it is 0.055 raised to the power of -10 divided by 0.055. So round it off into 4 decimal places. So when you compute that figure, it is giving you, someone has given me 7 point what? So 7.5376. So that value, now we use it at this point. So the annuity is the 0.112 million. Now that figure is what you have computed as 7.5376. 7.5376. That's now our present value for the subsidy. That now should give you the present value of the subsidy. It will give you the present value of the subsidy. The present value of the subsidy. So that is now our step number 2. That will be our step number 2. Now we go to the step number 3. Step number 3 should be present value. So step number 3 is that determine the present value of issuing costs or the flotation costs. We now determine the present value of the issuing costs or the flotation costs. Present value of the issuing costs or the flotation costs. So under that, we summarize that these are costs. These are costs which are incurred when raising the new capital. These are the costs which are incurred when raising the new capital. They are the costs which are incurred when raising new capital. When raising new capital. They are normally incurred in period 0. They are normally incurred in period 0. They are normally incurred in period 0. When the project is to be undertaken, they are normally incurred in period 0. When the project is to be undertaken, they are normally incurred in period 0 when the project is to be undertaken. And therefore, they are already in the present value terms. They are normally incurred in period 0 when the project is to be undertaken. And therefore, they are already in the present value terms. They are already in the present value terms. So let us now go to the question and get that cost. Let us now go to the question and get that cost. So that cost is in the note number 5. That cost is in the note number 5, where they have said that issue costs are estimated to be, the issue costs are estimated to be 1% of the debt financing, but excluding the one with the subsidy, and then 4% for equity financing. So these costs are not tax allowable. So if they are tax allowable, you subtract the tax, the way I've done the subsidy. But here they are saying they are not tax allowable. So let us compute that issue cost. You want now to come up with that particular issue cost. So you want to come up with that particular issue cost. So you want now to come up with the issue costs. So this is now our issue cost. You want to get the issue cost. So the issue cost in the note number 5, they have said the issue costs are estimated to be what percent? 1% of the debt financing. So we start with the one for the debt financing. Start with the one for the debt. So issue cost on the debt financing. So they are saying it is 1% of the debt, but they have said excluding the one with what? The subsidy, the one that has been subsidized. So go to the note, the second paragraph. They said that 18 million for the long-term loans. You can see the end of the second paragraph. But the subsidy was how much? 8 million. We had seen the one for the subsidy was 8 million. So when you subtract 8 million from the 10 million, how much is the balance that is not subsidized? The balance will be 10 million, isn't it? Yeah, the questioner has said that 1% of the debt financing, but excluding the one with the subsidy. When you check up there in the second paragraph, they have said 18 million with the long-term loans. 18 million with what? The long-term loans. But now, out of the 18 million, 8 million was having a subsidy. 8 million was having a subsidy. So the balance will be 10 million. But again, we cannot subtract 1% from the 10 million. If you subtract 1% from the 10 million, the balance will not be enough for the project. You want to get a balance which is 10 million to go to the project. That will mean that what they applied for is not 10 million, it was more than that. So that the bank will subtract the flotation cost. Remember, when you apply a loan, they give you net of the processing fee. That issuing cost is the same as the processing fee. So the money that came to your account for this investor was 10 million to be sufficient for the project. After they have subtracted what? 1%. So that will mean that that money that came into their account is 99% of the loan. So we shall be able to say that the 10 million is equivalent to 99%. How about 1% to be the flotation cost? Because if you subtract 1% from the 10 million, the remaining balance would not be sufficient for the project. The project must receive 10 million after they have subtracted their issuing cost. So that will imply that the 10 million is equivalent to 99%. How about the 1%? So to get that figure, simply take 1%, divide by 99%, and multiply by 10 million to give you the flotation cost or the issuing cost on the debt. If you subtract 1% from the 10 million, the balance will not be enough for the project. The project must receive the 10 million. So how much is that flotation cost or issuing cost? How much will it be? Those who are online. So it is 0.1. It is exactly 0.1. Yeah, you write that figure in full. It is 0.101. It is 0.1. It is 0.101 millions like that. 0.101 millions. So I hope all of you get that concept. If you subtract 1% from the 10 million, the balance would not be enough for the project. The project must receive the 10 million. So the amount that you received for the project must have been 99%. So that when you subtract the 1%, you get the 10 million. So that should be the concept you should be able to understand from that level. So that is for the issue cost on the debt. We also go to the issue cost of equity. We also got the one for equity. Still in that note number 5, they say that equity was to get what percent? In that note number 5. So equity is supposed to get 40% for equity financing, 4% for equity financing. So you have to get the issue cost on the equity. The issue cost on equity. Issue cost on equity. So on equity, I want you to go to the second paragraph. I want you to go to the second paragraph. Remember, total amount to raise was 48 million. Total amount to raise was 48 million. But out of the 48 million, they said 10% using what? Internal funds. Then 20 million using what? the right issue. So equity has two components. Equity has two components, that is retained earnings and ordinary shares. So right issues is the ordinary shares. The right issues is the ordinary shares. Then internal funds will be the retained earnings. Then when you are discussing the breakpoint, when you are computing the cost for the retained earnings and the cost for the ordinary share, we discovered that ordinary shares, they have the flotation cost, but retained earnings has no flotation cost. So we don't charge flotation cost on the retained earnings. We only charge the flotation cost on the ordinary share. So ordinary share in that case will be what? The right issue. The ordinary share will be the right issue. So we shall only be charging the flotation cost on the right issue. How much is the amount for the right issue? 20 million. So also that 20 million is equivalent to 96%. Because if you subtract the 4% from the 20 million, the balance will not be enough for the project. The project must have 48 million. So that means that 20 million was equivalent to 96% because the flotation cost was 4%. The flotation cost was 4%. So how much was that figure to raise from the equity? So take 4%, divide by 96%, multiplied by 20 million. So that now should give you the issue cost on equity. We don't include the internal funds. Internal funds are retained earnings, which will not attract the flotation cost. So this one should give you. So there are 3 zeros at the top. Write that figure in full. So there were 3 zeros at the top, which is in million. So write that figure in full so that now you come up with present value of the issue cost. We have said that they are normally incurred in period 0 and therefore they are already in present value terms. They are normally incurred in period 0 and therefore they are already in the present value terms. So we just have it like that. So that is now our step number 3. When we are using the adjusted NPV, that is now our step number 3. We go to the step number 4. So finally, the step number 4 would be that determine the present value of the interest tax benefit. Determine the present value of the interest tax benefit. Determine the present value of the interest tax benefit. Our step number 4 will now be determine the present value of the interest tax benefit. So first, we shall note that this benefit is always available. This benefit is always available. This benefit is always available to the company which has borrowed the finances. This benefit is always available to the company which has borrowed the finances. It is always available to the company which has borrowed the finances. And therefore it will be discounted. Using the risk-free rate. And therefore it will be discounted using the risk-free rate. And therefore it will be discounted using the risk-free rate. It will be discounted using the risk-free rate. It will be discounted using the risk-free rate. So first we get the total amount of interest. We want to get the total amount of interest. So amount of interest. Amount of interest. Amount of interest. So we start with the one which is subsidized. So the one that has been subsidized, you remember the subsidy was 2%. So when you minus 2% from 8%, the interest rate will be 6%. So you get 6% of the 8 million. 6% of the 8 million. So what is 6% of the 8 million? So 0.48. million. The next one is supposed to be the one without the subsidy. So this one, remember to take the 10 millions you earned. Remember the flotation cost of that figure. It was 0.101 million. I hope you recall that. Unakumbuka your subsidy. Sorry, not the subsidy, but the flotation cost. So to calculate the issue cost. So that issue cost you borrowed, you will pay interest on it because the government had, the company had paid for you. So this one, the interest rate is 8%. It is 8%. Zero point 80. After 8. Like that. Yeah. So add them together to give you the total amount of interest. One point two eight. 1.280.
8 again.
After 8.
808.
Like that. So interest is a tax allowable expense. So we less tax. Minus tax. So tax will be 30%. Zero point 38
64
64.
24.
So when we subtract, it is now going to give us. Sorry, you are just to get the tax, not to subtract the tax. We just want to get the tax on interest. We are simply getting tax on interest. So that tax on interest is 30% of that figure, which is giving pattern on it. So we wanted to get the present value of the interest tax benefit. We are computing present value of the interest tax benefit. We are simply getting the present value of the interest tax benefit. So it will be annuity multiplied by present value interest factor for the annuity. So the cost of capital, we have said that it is normally available to the company that has, so it is discounted using the risk-free rate. So it will be 5.5% for, was it 10 years? So that annuity is your interest tax benefit, which is 0.386424 million. So we had already calculated the 5.5% in year 10. It was 7.5376. So that now will give you present value of the interest tax benefit. That now should give you the present value of the interest tax benefit. It should now be able to give you present value of the interest tax benefit. So it is giving us which figure? 2.9127. So now finally, we can now get our adjusted NPV. Let us now get the adjusted NPV. Once you have those four workings, you should now come up with the adjusted NPV. Should now come up with the adjusted NPV. So you start with the best case NPV. Best case NPV. Then we add present value of the subsidy. We also add present value of the interest tax benefit, present value of the interest tax benefit. Then you subtract present value of the issue cost, present value of the issue cost. So we have calculated all of them. We have computed all of them. You start with the present, the best case NPV. We start off with what was the best case NPV. So best case NPV was which figure? Exactly 18 million. Was it rounded off or exact? So before you rounded off, it was which value? Mr. Man, 18 points. Then subsidy, present value for the subsidy, we got which figure? In the step number 2, we calculated the present value for the subsidy.
0.8442.
0.8442. Do like that. Then what have we just calculated as the present value for the interest tax benefit? The one that we have just calculated. 2.9127. 9127. Then we also calculated the step number 3. What was the present value of the issue cost?
0.93
0.93
43
43.
33.
So get that total to give you now the adjusted NPV. Get now that total to give you the adjusted NPV. So is it positive or negative? It is a positive of how much?
2.83.
So if it is positive, then the advice will be that accept the project. Accept the project. Accept the project because it has a positive adjusted NPV. Accept the project because it has a positive adjusted NPV. It has a positive adjusted NPV. So that is now for long-term financing decision number 3, which is adjusted NPV. So finally, the long-term financing decision number 4 will be replacement analysis. We also have the replacement analysis. We shall also be having the replacement analysis. We can also go to the replacement analysis. So we can write something brief on the replacement analysis. So we can summarize that this involves the process of replacing. It involves the process of replacing inefficient and old asset. Replacing inefficient and old assets. Replacing inefficient and old assets with the new and more efficient assets, with the new and the more efficient assets, with the new and the more efficient assets, with the new and the more efficient assets. It normally takes into consideration the incremental cash inflows and cash outflows. It normally takes into consideration the incremental cash inflows and cash outflows. It is classified into 2 categories. It is classified into 2 categories. It is classified into 2 categories. Roman letter 1 will be replacement of the assets with unequal with an unequal economic life. Replacement of the assets with the unequal economic life. Then Roman letter 2 would be replacement of the assets with the equal economic life. Replacement of the assets with the equal economic life. So we can start off with replacement of the assets with the unequal economic life. Let us start with replacement of the assets with unequal economic life. Replacement of the assets with unequal economic life. So under that, we can note that when NPV technique is used, when NPV technique is used to evaluate mutually exclusive projects, when NPV technique is used to evaluate mutually exclusive projects with an equal economic life, comma, optimal results may not be obtained. The optimal results may not be obtained. The optimal results may not be obtained because it will be difficult. To compare. Because it will be difficult to compare the cash flows of the projects. It will be difficult to compare the cash flows of the projects. It will be difficult to compare the cash flows of the projects with an unequal economic life. It will be difficult to compare the cash flows of the projects with the unequal economic life. In this case, the following two methods are used to evaluate the projects. In this case, the following two methods are used to evaluate the projects. In this case, the following two methods are used to evaluate the projects. So we start with A. A would be replacement chain. A is the replacement chain. A is the replacement chain or the common life method. A is the replacement chain or the common life method. A is the replacement chain or common life method. Then B is equivalent annual annuity method. So B is equivalent annual annuity method. B is equivalent annual annuity method. So B is the equivalent annual annuity method. So let us start with A, the replacement chain or common life method. We start with A as the replacement chain or the common life method. Replacement chain or the common life method. So under that, we summarize that under this method, comma, the economic life of the projects is made to be similar. Under this method, comma, the economic life of the projects is made to be similar. Under this method, comma, the economic life of the project is made to be similar. By carrying out continuous replacement. by carrying out continuous replacement. Then we continue by writing that the optimal replacement is at the least common multiple. The optimal replacement is at the least common multiple. In brackets LCM, the optimal replacement period is at the least common multiple. Is at the least common multiple. So I will give you a brief illustration on that to see how to carry out that replacement. So we can write that an illustration. We can write that. Consider the following two mutually exclusive projects. 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 The following two mutually exclusive projects. So there is project X and also project Y. There is project X and also project Y. So we start with the initial cost. So initial cost for X, it is 100,000. For Y, it is also 100,000. It is also 100,000. Then economic life. Economic life. So X, it is 2 years. Y will be 3 years. Y is going to be 3 years. Then the cost of capital. Cost of capital. This will be 10%. The other one will also be 10%. The other one will also be 10%. Then there is annual cash inflows. Annual cash inflows. So annual cash inflows, year one, this one will be 6,500. The other one will be 66. So year two, this one will also be 6,500. The other one will be 44,000. Then year three. This one has no value because it is for 2 years. This one will be 20,000. That one will be 20,000. So now required is that evaluate the two projects. Evaluate the two projects using the replacement chain method. Evaluate the two projects using the replacement chain method. Using the replacement chain method. So I want you to understand something brief there. You can see project X has 2 years. Project Y, it has how many years? 3 years. So we need to get the least common multiple. So least common multiple, it is simply, the least common multiple is simply the smallest figure that the two of them will go into without any decimal point. So what is the least common multiple between 3 years and 2 years? A figure that all of them will go to without a decimal point. 2 and 3. it will go to which figure? Without a decimal point, the smallest. So the smallest is 6. 2 can go to 6. How many times? 3 times. 3 can go to 6. Yeah, that is the least common multiple. The least common multiple is a figure where the 2 figures can go to without any decimal point. The smallest figure that the 2 of them. So 6 years will be the least common multiple. So that means that project X, we replace it twice to make it 6 years. Remember, the first 2 years is not a replacement, but project Y, we replace it once to go to 6 years, because the first 3 years is not a replacement. You replace it to cover year 4, year 5, and year 6. So X will be replaced twice to make it 6 years, because the first 2 years is not a replacement. So it is not 3 times. Then Y, we replace it once. So from that arrangement, we shall be calculating NPV with the replacement for each. So we start with the project X. We start off with project X. We start off with project X. So we start off with project X. So we are computing the NPV with replacement. It will be present value for the cash inflows. We minus present value for the cash outflow. So it is NPV with the replacement. It will be present value for the cash inflows. We minus the present value for the cash outflows. So there will be the year, then cash flows, then present value interest factor. The cost of capital for project X, it is 10% for each year, so that you come up with the present value. So you start off with the year 1. You start off with the year 1. So year 1, the cash flows was 60,500. You see, for project X year 1. Then year 2, it is also 60,500, but we replace it at the end of year 2. So you replace with the identical item. You can see the initial cost for that project X. Yeah. It is how much? 100. So you replace it by subtracting, by paying 100,000 to replace it, so that we get now the cash inflows at the end of year 2. So that should be negative what? So it is negative 39,500. So year 2, sorry, year 3 is the same as year 1. It will be 60,500. Then at the end of year 4, you replace it again. 6,500 minus 100,000. So this one will also be negative 39,500. So year 5 is the same as year 1. It is 6,500. So we are not replacing it again. For year 6, it will just be 6,500 because we are not replacing it. Because we are not replacing it again. So now you confirm in the table, the single period table. You confirm from the table, the single period table. So this one will be 0.9091 for year 1. So confirm year 2 is which figure? 10% year 2. 0 point what? 82. Then year 3 should be 0.7513. Then year 4.
2.6836.
Then year 5.
6209.
Then year 6.
0.5645.
So multiply these figures by those values to give you the present value of the cash inflows. Then we'll also less present value for the cash outflows. That was the original initial, so that we get the end. So that is now for project X. So we do the same for Y. We do the same for project Y. So we repeat the same for project Y. So Y, year one was 66,000. Year two was 44,000. But year three, it was 20, but you replace it at the end of year three. So you subtract the 100,000, which will give you negative 80. Year four will be 66. Year five will be 44. Now year six will just be 20. So repeat the same for project Y. So year one cash flows for Y was 66,000. Year two was 44,000. Year three was 20. But because it was for 3 years, we replace it at the end of year three by paying 100,000 because the initial cost was the same for both. Then you also do the year four is the same as year one, 66. Year five will be the same as year two, 44. Then finally 20 like that. Then get the present value for that. So now we compare the two. Which one has the highest NPV with the replacement? Project X or Y? So the advice will be that select project Y. Select project Y since it has a higher NPV with the replacement. Select project Y since it has a higher NPV with replacement. We select project Y because it has a higher NPV with the replacement. So we are supposed to go to the second method, which was equivalent annual annuity method. We say there were two methods, replacement chain, then equivalent annual annuity method. We now go to the method number 2, which is equivalent annual annuity method. Equivalent annual annuity method. So that one, we shall discuss it in our next class, which is tomorrow. Then we see how far it will work for us. So once we finish that, I had sent some notes to the class group for the mergers and acquisition. I hope you had seen those notes. Once we finish this one, we shall go to the mergers and acquisition. So by our next class, we should be able to finish this. So let us stop there for today. When we meet now, we shall look at that second method. So we stop there for now.